Now let's have a look at all the various biomes of the world, and this list of biomes that we are going to see it on the basis of various climatic zones. So first we'll start with the tropics. We'll look at all the different kinds of biomes that are present in the tropics, and after the tropics we'll move on to the temperate zone, and then finally we'll move on to the polar regions. And like this we'll have a look at all the different kinds of biomes which are present in all these different types of climatic zones. So first to start with, we have the tropical climatic zone. When we talk about the tropical climate zone, what you will observe here is that these are the zones which lie in 20 degree north to 20 degrees south latitudes, basically between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. This is where we observe this kind of climatic zone. Now, one thing before we move on to all the different kinds of climatic zones, let me make this very clear that this is just one of the ways in which the classifications are done. This has been done by one scientist. Then you will have another set of researchers and scientists who have devised another way of looking at things. But more or less what you'll have a look at all the time is that whether you look at all the different various kinds of classifications that have been done, all these classifications will follow a very similar pattern. If you look at the tropical rainforests that have been defined by one scientist as compared to what has been defined by another scientist, you'll always see that they are very similar in the regions that have been defined. So, because most of them are on the basis of the climate, most of them are on the basis of precipitation, most of them are on the basis of temperature, and because of all these factors, even though there are very slight variations that will happen, but mostly it will remain the same. So you don't have to worry if you see any other source where you see that there is a slight variation in the climatic zones that they talk about as compared to what we are discussing here, because most of them will remain the same. And talking about it from the examination perspective, you will see that most of them will not see any change and you will be able to mark the correct answer very easily. So let's have a look at all these different zones. So when I talk about the climate zone in the tropics, first of all, as I said, that we know it's between 20 degrees north and 20 degrees south latitudes. So these are the regions where the temperature will be very high because they are very near to the equator, and that is why the temperatures will be very high. There are seasonal variations that are observed, and these seasonal variations will be observed even higher when you go towards 10 degree, 15 degree, 20 degree latitudes. In the tropics, especially at the equator, the seasonal variations are not much. You will see that if you look at the annual temperature does not change much. It will always remain above 20 degrees Celsius. Even if you go to high elevations also, you will see that there is not much of a difference that comes in the case of temperature. Now, apart from this, one more factor that plays a role here is the seasonal variation in the rainfall. The rainfall pattern has been observed to be very high in the areas which are very near to the equator, but as you go away from the equator, you will see that there are patterns of high rainfall and low rainfall. So let's look at the different kinds of biomes that we have in the tropical climate zone. So first one that we have is a tropical rainforest biome. And as you can see in the pictures, these will be forests which are very dense. These will be forests where the tree length will be very high. You will see that the trees would grow up to 40 to 50 meters. And these will be the forests which will always cover up the entire canopy, and because of that, you will see that very little can grow on the ground because they do not get the amount of sunlight that they would need for photosynthesis to happen. So that's why you will see that although there will be shrubs, there will be other herbs and grasses that will be present, as you can see on the picture also. But what will happen ultimately is when you talk about the soil, and this is very important from prelims perspective also, that soil is not rich in nutrient by itself. So you might think that because of the high density of the plantation that we see and the other organisms that are able to survive here, we should have a very good soil, very highly nutrient rich soil. But that's not the case. And why it doesn't happen so is mainly because of the fact that the humus part of the soil gets eroded away. And because of that, you'll see that normally they will not be rich in nutrient. They will see a reddish color, and this reddish color will come from the iron oxides or the aluminium oxides that are present in these regions. So when we talk about the fact that they still have a very high growth, they have a very good vegetation, that happens because of the fact that a lot of shedding of the leaves happen. And because of the shedding of the leaves that happens in these regions, you will observe that this will very quickly change into the organic matter. This will very quickly start to decay because there is no sunlight. And since there is no sunlight, what will happen is, in case of the fact that sunlight is not there and humidity is high, what will be observed is the fact that they will very quickly start to decay. And this decaying of the organic matter, the leaves, etc., is the source of the nutrients for all this vegetation that grows here. So this is one point that you need to note. And that is another reason why when we talk about cutting of trees, when we talk about deforestation, we'll discuss about this deforestation in the upcoming chapters. But when we talk about deforestation, what we have observed is that if deforestation is carried out in these kind of tropical regions, tropical rainforest to be exact, then in that case we see that these forests, as they are cut down, they will not grow back very fast. Why? Because the organic matter that was falling onto the surface, that was the whole source of the nutrients that is present there. Now that the deforestation is taking place, all these trees are being taken away, there's no source of the nutrients because soil is not rich in nutrients. So if there is a deforestation that is happening in the regions of tropical evergreen forest, in these rainforests we'll observe that they will not grow very fast, and that's why the destruction will be more rampant when it comes to these kind of forests. So that's why this you need to understand, that why deforestation in tropical evergreen forest is a bigger issue as compared to the deforestation that might happen in any other part of the world. So if you observe the map, if you look at the colors which are dark green, the areas which are marked in dark green, these are the regions where we observe tropical rainforest. In India, as you can see, our northeastern region and the Western Ghats region are the two forests that can be clubbed as tropical rainforest biomes. Now, just to look at all the important points related to tropical rainforest biome, first, the rainfall will be at least 200 centimeters annually and not less than 10 centimeter throughout any single month. Then after that distribution, as we have already seen in the map, you have the Amazon and the Orinoco basin of South America, southernmost West Africa, Indo-Malaya rainforest parts and parts of Southeast Asia. These are the primary regions of rainforest biome. The soil, as I said, is deeply weathered and takes reddish color due to aluminium and iron oxides which are present here. Vegetation is multi-storied with smaller trees, shrubs, herbs and epiphytes under dominant trees. And as I said, the trees may grow up to 40 to 50 meters. In some cases, it has been observed that it can go up to 55 meters in length. And one last point is about biological productivity. When we talk about biological productivity, we see that biological productivity of the tropical rainforest biome is the highest as compared to any other biome that we have. That has been observed. Again, the standing biomass of this forest will also be the highest because of the fact that it is able to sustain a lot of a huge variant of species of plants and animals. So that's why even species diversity, if we talk about what is species diversity, we'll see in the upcoming chapter, but species diversity will also be seen as the highest in these regions. So these are some of the areas of interest when it comes to your prelims examination as well. All these points are the ones which remain very, very important from your examination perspective. The next biome that we have in the tropical region is the tropical seasonal forest biome. Now here seasonal becomes a very important keyword. Why the word seasonal is being used? Because this is where you will see that there will be seasonal patterns that will be observed. When we talk about the evergreen forest, in the evergreen forest what has been observed is that the rainfall will keep on happening almost throughout the year. So that's why there will be greenery that will be maintained throughout the year, and that's why the shedding of leaf that keeps on happening will be replaced by the new leaves in every season. But that's not the case when you come to the seasonal forest biome. When we talk about the tropical seasonal forest biome, first of all, the canopy is not that dense. The density of canopy has now reduced. So sunlight is now able to fall onto the surface as well. Then there is seasonal variation. That is, the rainfall pattern changes from season to season. There will be patterns of high rainfall and there will be seasons where the rainfall will be very low. And this is where the water stress starts to come into the picture. And because of the water stress that will be observed in these seasons, there will be huge amount of shedding of leaves that happens in these seasons. Now, when we talk about this particular biome, this usually will be seen after 10 degree latitude. So from 0 degree to up to 10 degrees, normally you will observe that this kind of biome will not exist. Now, if you look at the map of the seasonal forest, you will observe that they are found in these kind of regions. For example, you can see that they are found here. Apart from that, in the African continent, this is found here. In India also, a large part of Indian subcontinent can be clubbed as tropical seasonal forest. Then you see this in Australia also, you see this in the North America also. There are patches everywhere, but mostly what we have observed is that this also lies between 20 degree north to 20 degree south latitudes. Now, seasonality is a big factor here. Soil, when we talk about it, the soil still is not nutrient rich. And then what we see is that there is a little gradation that happens, that from these kind of tropical seasonal forest, we start to move into thorny forest, and then ultimately you will see that true deserts will start towards the end. So this is what has been observed for most of these forests around the world wherever they exist. So to sum up the points with respect to tropical seasonal forest biome, first of all, they have a preponderance of deciduous trees that shed their leaves during the season of water stress. Then the vegetation grades from dry forest into thorn forest, and then finally into true deserts, and soil is strongly lateritic and poor in nutrient composition. So these are the three major points about these kind of forests. Then the next biome that is observed in the tropics are the savanna biomes. So when we talk about the savanna biome, what do we see here? Basically, we see that these are grasslands, and these are grasslands with scattered trees. So for example, you'll see that there will be patches of trees that will be observed whenever you talk about the savanna. Now, in savanna, what has been observed with respect to rainfall is that normally it will be between 90 to 150 centimeters of rainfall that will happen, but there will be very dry seasons that will come up. There will be seasons where the rainfall could be even below 5 centimeters, and these will also be the seasons where the temperature is very high, and it can also lead to fires. And fires is something which is a very strong characteristic of savanna, because what has been observed is that all the species that survive in these regions, they are the ones that have been habituated to having fires, and regrowth after fires happen very quickly. Problem starts where? The problem is ultimately what has been observed is that because of human activities, these fires have started to increase. Because of the climate change that has been observed, these kind of fires have increased. So because of that, many of the species that survive in these regions, they have started to show a problem in adapting to these kind of situations. So you can say that this is one biome which is very much affected by human activities as well. So these are the things that needs to be kept in mind. Now, when it comes to the distribution of savanna, eastern part of Africa is one region where we see the widest distribution of savanna biome. So if we look at the distribution map, we already talked about the tropical seasonal forests and savanna. They have the same distribution, but this is the region where you find savanna the most. The characteristic savanna grassland are found the most in this particular region of Eastern Africa. So just to sum up the points which are important, they are grasslands with scattered trees, as I said. They are found in the drier regions of the tropics. The rainfall is 90 to 150 centimeters per year, and there can be some areas where the rainfall will be lesser than 5 centimeter. Forest fire, human activities heavily influence the nature of biome. One more factor that you can actually add to your notes is grazing. That grazing also plays a big role when it comes to savanna biome. So these are few of the characteristics of the savanna. The next biome that we have in the tropical region is the subtropical desert biome. Now when we talk about subtropical desert biome, they are distributed normally between 20 degrees to 30 degrees north and south latitudes, north as well as south latitudes. Then after that, now what else do we know about them? First of all, the rainfall will be very low. The annual rainfall that will be observed would be even lesser than 25 centimeters, even less than 25 centimeters. Then if you talk about the species that are found, the species diversity will actually be very low. But as compared to the arid regions that are there in the polar regions or the temperate regions, compared to that, the species diversity will be higher in the subtropical desert. So subtropical desert, and if you have to locate them on the map, you have two regions. One, the North African region, mostly when you talk about the Sahara, and then you have Australia where this is observed. In Australia, all the 4-5 deserts that we have, they also belong to the subtropical desert classification. So just to sum up the important points that we already discussed, first of all, they are found in 20 degree to 30 degree north and south latitudes. Rainfall will be lesser than 25 centimeters. Soil is shallow, virtually devoid of organic matter and neutral in pH. Vegetation varies according to moisture availability. And then finally, the species diversity is higher than the temperate arid regions or the polar arid regions that exist. So these are some of the important points for subtropical desert biome. So with this, we come to the end of the first chunk of the biomes that we have, which are tropical in nature.